Your soulmate is thinking about you. Pick up the phone. The moment you read that line, something inside you paused. Not completely stopped, but slowed down just enough for you to feel it. Your heartbeat shifted, your thoughts got quieter, and your focus locked onto those exact words. You stared at your phone a little longer than expected, as if the screen might reveal something more if you just waited. Maybe a name, maybe a sign, maybe a reason. But nothing changed. It was still just that one sentence, simple yet strangely heavy, like it carried a meaning meant only for you. You let out a small breath, almost a laugh, trying to brush it off. You told yourself it is just one of those random things, it does not mean anything. But even as you said that, your thumb hovered over your call log almost instinctively, like your body was reacting before your mind could catch up. And that is when it hit you. What if it was not random? What if somewhere out there someone actually had you on their mind right now? Not casually, not as a passing thought, but deeply, intentionally. The kind of thinking where your name sits quietly in their chest, where memories replay without warning, where your absence feels louder than anything else in the room. You tried to shake that feeling off, but it stayed wrapping itself around your thoughts. You closed your eyes for a moment and faces began to appear. Some familiar, some distant, some that belong to a version of your life you do not visit anymore. Conversations you never finished, words you never said, feelings you buried because the timing was wrong, or maybe because you were scared of what they meant. And then there was one face, the one that stayed longer than the others, the one your mind did not rush past, the one your heart recognized before you could even form a thought about it. You opened your eyes quickly, almost like you were caught doing something you were not supposed to do. You told yourself, no, it cannot be them. But the more you denied it, the clearer it became. You remembered the way things ended, or maybe the way they never really ended at all. There was no proper goodbye, no clean closure, just a slow fading into silence. Messages became shorter, calls became less frequent, until one day there was nothing left but memories and questions you never got answers to. And yet, despite all that, there was always this quiet feeling that the story was not completely over. Not fully written, not properly understood. And now here you were staring at your phone, feeling that same unfinished energy coming back into your chest. You wondered if they ever thought about you the way you sometimes thought about them. Late at night, when everything goes quiet, or during random moments in the day when something small reminds you of them, like a song, a place, a phrase. Did your name ever cross their mind the way theirs just crossed yours? Did they ever pick up their phone, scroll through your old messages, and stop for a second just to feel something familiar again? Or were you the only one holding onto something that no longer existed? That thought hurt a little, but it did not stop the curiosity. If anything, it made it stronger. Your thumb was still hovering over your phone, caught between logic and emotion. Logic said, do not do it, it has been too long, things are different now, you might just open old wounds. But emotion was quieter yet stronger. It did not argue, it did not explain, it just felt. And what it felt right now was a pull, a subtle but undeniable pull towards something you could not fully understand. You started thinking about all the what ifs. What if they were thinking about you at this exact moment? What if they were going through something and your name came to mind as comfort? What if they missed you but did not have the courage to reach out? Or what if they were staring at their phone too, wondering the same thing, waiting for a sign that might never come unless one of you creates it? That thought sent a strange warmth through you, mixed with fear, because reaching out means risking something. It means opening a door you once closed even if it was never locked properly. It means facing whatever comes next, silence, indifference, or maybe something real, something unexpected. You took a deeper breath, your fingers tightening slightly around your phone. It felt heavier now, like it held more than just a device, it held a choice, a moment, a possibility. And in that moment you realized something important. Maybe it was not about whether they were thinking about you. Maybe it was about why that line affected you the way it did. Maybe it touched something inside you that was already there, something unresolved, something still alive, something you never fully let go of. Because if there was truly nothing left, you would not be feeling this. You would not be hesitating. You would not be imagining their name lighting up your screen. You would not be wondering if your voice would still feel familiar to them. The truth is, some connections do not disappear. They change, they fade, they go quiet, but they do not always end. And sometimes all it takes is one small moment, one random sentence to bring everything back like it never really left. Your heart was beating a little faster now, your thoughts no longer calm. You looked at your phone again, this time not as a distraction but as something real, something that could actually change what happens next. And for a second you stopped overthinking. You stopped worrying about the outcome, about what it might mean, about what could go wrong. Instead you focused on that feeling, the one you could not ignore, the one that told you there was something unfinished, something waiting, something still breathing quietly between you and them. Your thumb moved slightly, hovering over their name, your chest tightening as if your body already knew what you were about to do. And right before you made that decision, one thought crossed your mind, clear and simple: what if this is the moment you have been unknowingly waiting for all along? And then you just sat there staring at the screen longer than you expected, like time itself was waiting for your decision. Your thumb did not move, but your mind kept racing, going back and forth between memories and possibilities. You remembered the last time you talked to them, not the exact words but the feeling. That strange mix of comfort and distance, like something was already slipping away even when you were still holding on to it. You wondered if they felt it too, or if it was just you overthinking again like you always do. You let out a slow breath and leaned back slightly, trying to calm yourself, but the feeling did not go away. It stayed right there, steady and quiet, like a voice that was not loud but impossible to ignore. You looked at their name again, and it felt familiar in a way that scared you a little, because no matter how much time had passed, it still meant something. Not the same as before, maybe not as intense, but still there, still real, still unfinished in some way. You started thinking about what you would even say if they picked up. Would you act normal, like nothing happened, or would your voice give everything away? Would they sound the same, or would there be a distance in their tone that reminds you how much has changed? That thought made your chest feel a little tight, but at the same time there was something else, something softer, something hopeful that you could not explain. Maybe it was the idea that not everything has to end badly, maybe some things just pause, waiting for the right moment to continue. And maybe this was that moment. Or maybe you were just creating meaning where there was none, just to feel something again. You were not sure, and that uncertainty is what kept you stuck. But then another thought came in quietly: what if you do nothing? What if you put your phone down, ignore this feeling, and move on like you have been doing all this time? Life will continue, nothing will change on the outside, but deep inside there will always be that one question that never fully fades: what if you had just tried? That question felt heavier than rejection, heavier than awkward silence, heavier than anything that could go wrong in that call. Because at least if you try, you will know. And knowing even if it hurts is sometimes easier than wondering forever. Your grip on the phone tightened again, and this time your thumb moved just a little closer. Not enough to press the call button, but enough to make your heart beat faster. You could feel it now, clear and loud, like it was trying to push you forward. You swallowed slowly, your throat a little dry, as if your body was reacting to something real even though nothing had happened yet. And then, without overthinking it too much, without giving your mind time to stop you, your thumb finally tapped the screen. The phone started ringing. 1 second passed, then 2, then 3, and suddenly everything felt too real. Every ring felt louder than it should be, every second stretched longer than normal. You almost wanted to cut the call, pretend it never happened, but something inside you held you there. You listened carefully, your heart racing, your thoughts completely silent now. And then the ringing stopped. For a brief moment there was nothing, just a quiet pause that felt heavier than anything before it. And then you heard it. Their voice. Soft, familiar, and slightly surprised, like they were not expecting this, but not completely shocked either. You did not respond immediately, because hearing them again after all this time felt like stepping into a memory that never really left. It was strange how quickly everything came back, the comfort, the tension, the connection, all at once. You finally said hello, your voice lower than usual, almost careful, like you were afraid of breaking something fragile between you. There was a small pause on their side before they replied, and that pause said more than words ever could. It held questions, emotions, maybe even the same confusion you were feeling. You both did not know what this call meant yet, but you both knew it meant something. The conversation started slow, simple words, basic questions: how are you, how have you been? But beneath those words there was so much more. There were unsaid things hidden between every sentence, things you both felt but were not ready to say yet. And still, even with all that uncertainty, there was something undeniably real about that moment. It did not feel forced, it did not feel wrong, it just felt unexpected in a way that made sense. As you listened to them talk, you realized something important. This was not about going back to what things were before. That version of you, that version of them, that version of the connection, it no longer existed in the same way. But that did not mean there was nothing left. Sometimes things do not need to be the same to still matter. Sometimes a different version of something can still be meaningful in its own way. And maybe that is what this was: not a restart, not a continuation, but something new, built from something old. You found yourself relaxing a little, your voice becoming more natural, your thoughts less guarded. The fear was still there, but it was not controlling you anymore. Instead, there was curiosity, a quiet openness to whatever this could become, or even if it became nothing at all. Because at least now you were not stuck in that endless loop of what if. You were here in the moment, actually experiencing something real. And that alone felt worth it. As the conversation went on, you noticed small things: the way they laughed was still the same, the way they paused before certain words, the way they said your name like it still carried familiarity. And it made you realize that time changes a lot, but it does not erase everything. Some parts stay no matter how far apart you go. And maybe those are the parts that truly matter. You did not know where this would lead, maybe nowhere, maybe somewhere unexpected, but for the first time in a long time you felt at peace with not knowing. Because you took the step, you answered the feeling, you chose to find out instead of wondering forever. And sometimes that is all that matters. Not the outcome, not the result, but the courage to act on something real when it calls you. And as you sat there still on the call listening to a voice you once thought you lost, you realized something simple yet powerful. Some moments are not meant to be understood before they happen. They are meant to be felt when they do. And this was one of those moments, and for a while you both kept talking like two people trying to understand a feeling they had once known but could not fully name anymore. The conversation moved slowly, but it never felt empty. Every word carried weight, even the simple ones. There was something in the pauses too, something that spoke louder than anything you were actually saying. It was not awkward silence, it was more like both of you were thinking at the same time, choosing carefully what to say and what to keep inside. You could feel it in the way they spoke, a slight hesitation before certain sentences, like they were holding back something deeper. And maybe you were doing the same without even realizing it. You asked about their life and they answered, but not in a rushed way, not like they were trying to end the conversation. They took their time, and that alone told you that this moment mattered to them too in some way. Not necessarily in the same way it mattered to you, but enough to stay, enough to continue, enough to not ignore this unexpected connection that just happened out of nowhere. You noticed how your surroundings slowly faded into the background, like everything else became less important. The noise around you, the things you were doing before, all of it disappeared, and all that was left was their voice and the feeling that came with it. It was strange how something so simple could take over your entire focus like that. And the more you listened, the more you realized that you were not just hearing their words, you were feeling them. Every little change in tone, every pause, every soft laugh, it all meant something, even if you could not explain exactly what. At one point there was a longer silence, and neither of you spoke immediately. You almost thought the call might end there, but it did not. Instead, they took a small breath and asked you something more real, something that went beyond surface-level conversation. They asked if you were truly okay, not in a casual way, but in a way that felt like they actually wanted to know. And that question caught you off guard, because it went straight past all the walls you had built over time. You paused for a moment, not because you did not have an answer, but because you were not sure how honest you wanted to be. It would have been easy to just say yes and move on like people usually do. But something about this moment made that feel wrong. So instead you gave a more real answer, not everything, not all at once, but enough to show that you were not completely fine, that life had been a mix of good and confusing and everything in between. There was another small pause after that, but it felt different this time, softer, more understanding. And then they shared something too, not everything, but enough to meet you halfway. And just like that, the conversation shifted, it became more real, more open, more honest, without either of you forcing it. It was not about the past anymore, not completely. It was about who you both were now and how you had changed in ways you did not fully notice until this moment. You started to see them differently, not just as the person you once knew, but as someone who had grown through their own experiences just like you had. And in that realization there was a quiet respect, something deeper than just old feelings. Time had created distance, but it had also created perspective. You were not the same people anymore, and maybe that was not a bad thing. Maybe that was the reason this conversation felt different from what it used to be. There was less pressure, less expectation, just two people sharing a moment that neither of them planned. And somehow that made it more genuine. You found yourself smiling slightly, not because everything was perfect, but because it felt real in a way you had not felt in a long time. There was no pretending, no trying to impress, no need to be anything other than what you were in that moment. And maybe that is what made it so rare. As the minutes passed, you both started to relax even more. The hesitation slowly faded and the conversation began to flow naturally like it used to, but with a different kind of calmness. Not the intense emotional rush from before, but something steadier, something that felt more grounded. And in that calmness you started to understand something important. Not every connection is meant to stay the same forever. Some are meant to change shape, to become something else, something quieter but still meaningful. And maybe that is what this was becoming. Not a repeat of the past, but a new version of something that still mattered. At some point you both laughed about something small and it felt surprisingly easy, like no time had passed at all. And for a second it almost confused you how something could feel both familiar and new at the same time. But you did not question it too much. You just let it be. Because overthinking is what usually ruins moments like this, and for once you did not want to do that. You just wanted to stay present, to experience whatever this was without trying to define it too quickly. The call continued and neither of you seemed in a hurry to end it. That alone said enough. Because if it did not matter, one of you would have found an excuse by now. But neither of you did. You both stayed, choosing to be there even without saying it directly. And sometimes that choice speaks louder than anything else. Eventually the conversation slowed again, not because it was over but because it had reached a point where words were no longer as necessary. There was a comfortable silence now, something that felt complete rather than empty. And in that silence you realized something that you had not fully understood before. This was not about fixing the past or bringing something back. This was about acknowledging that what you had once shared still existed in some form, even if it had changed. It was about giving that feeling a moment to breathe instead of ignoring it completely. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it did not need to become anything more than this. Or maybe it would slowly turn into something unexpected over time. But you did not need to decide that right now. For the first time you were okay with letting things unfold naturally without forcing an outcome. When the call finally started to come to an end, it did not feel heavy or sad like you might have expected. It felt calm, almost peaceful, like something had been settled inside you without needing a clear explanation. You said goodbye, not in a final way but in a soft way, like you both knew this might not be the last time. And when the call ended you looked at your phone again, but this time it did not feel heavy anymore. It felt light, like you had just released something you had been holding onto without even realizing it. You sat there for a moment, letting everything sink in, the feelings, the thoughts, the quiet shift that had happened inside you. And then you took a slow breath and leaned back slightly, a small smile forming without you trying. Because deep down you knew one thing for sure. Picking up the phone was not about them thinking about you. It was about you finally listening to something inside yourself that you had been ignoring for too long. And maybe that is what soulmate moments really are, not some perfect magical connection but simple, honest moments that remind you of something real, something human, something that stays even when everything else changes. And after the call ended you did not move for a while. You just sat there staring at the same screen that felt so heavy a few minutes ago but now felt strangely calm. It was not excitement and it was not sadness either, it was something in between, something steady, something that made you feel grounded in a way you had not felt in a long time. Your mind was not racing anymore, your heart was not confused anymore, everything inside you had slowed down, like it finally found its rhythm again. You replayed the conversation in your head, not every word but the feeling of it, the tone, the pauses, the way both of you stayed instead of leaving. And that is when you realized something deeper. This was never really about that one message you saw earlier. This was about everything that you had been carrying quietly for so long without facing it. That one moment just gave it a voice. You stood up slowly, still holding your phone, and walked a few steps without really thinking about where you were going. It felt like your body needed to move even if your mind wanted to stay in that moment a little longer. You looked around and everything seemed normal. Nothing had changed outside, but inside something was different. Something had shifted in a way that you could not fully explain, but you could definitely feel. It was like a weight you did not know you were carrying had finally been lifted, or at least made lighter. You thought about how many times you almost reached out before but stopped yourself. How many times you typed something and then deleted it. How many times you convinced yourself that it was better to stay silent. And maybe at that time it was the right decision. Maybe you were not ready. Maybe they were not ready. Maybe the timing just was not right. But today something changed, not because the situation was perfect, but because you were different. You were not reaching out from a place of need or loneliness. You were reaching out from a place of honesty. And that makes all the difference. You slowly sat down again, this time more relaxed, your shoulders not as tense, your breathing more natural. You placed your phone beside you, but your attention did not leave it completely. Not in an anxious way, but in a quiet awareness, like you were open to whatever might happen next without forcing it. And then a thought came to you, not loud, not urgent, but clear. What if this is how things are supposed to happen? Not planned, not forced, not perfectly timed, but real and unexpected. What if the most important moments in your life are the ones that catch you off guard, the ones you almost ignore, the ones that start with something as simple as a random line on a screen? You smiled slightly at that thought because it made sense in a strange way. Life has never really followed your plans anyway, so why would something like this be any different? You leaned back and closed your eyes for a second, letting yourself feel everything without trying to label it. There was peace there, not the kind that comes from having everything figured out, but the kind that comes from accepting that you do not need to have all the answers right now. And maybe that is what you were missing before. You were always trying to understand everything, to predict everything, to control what comes next. But moments like this do not work like that. They just happen, and all you can do is choose how you respond to them. And today you chose to respond instead of running away. That alone felt like growth. Your thoughts slowly shifted from the past to the present. You were no longer stuck in what happened before or what could have been. You were here now, aware of yourself, aware of your feelings, aware of the fact that you are capable of facing things you once avoided. And that realization gave you a quiet confidence, not loud, not obvious, but steady. You picked up your phone again, not because you were expecting a message or a call, but because it no longer felt like something you needed to be afraid of. It was just a phone again, not a source of anxiety, not a reminder of something unresolved. And that small change meant more than you expected. You opened your messages not to check anything specific, just to see. And for a second there was nothing new, and that was okay. You did not feel disappointed, you did not feel restless, you just accepted it. Because now you understood that one conversation does not define everything. It was a moment, an important one, but still just a part of something bigger. And whatever comes next will come in its own time. You put your phone down again, and this time you looked ahead, not at a screen, not at the past, but at your own thoughts, your own life, your own direction. You realized that even if nothing more happens with them, this moment still changed something in you. It reminded you that you can face your emotions instead of hiding from them, that you can take a step even when you are unsure, that you can choose honesty over comfort. And those things matter far beyond any one connection. As time passed, you felt yourself becoming more present, more aware of everything around you, the small details, the quiet sounds, the normal rhythm of life. And it all felt a little different, not because anything actually changed outside, but because your perspective did. You were not carrying the same hesitation anymore, you were not stuck in the same loop of overthinking anymore. You had moved forward, even if it was just one step. And sometimes one step is enough to change everything. Later that day you found yourself thinking about them again, but this time it felt lighter. There was no pressure attached to it, no expectation, no fear. Just a simple thought of someone who once meant a lot and still holds a place in your story in a different way. And that felt okay. It felt natural. You did not need to rush anything, you did not need to define anything, you just needed to let things be. And maybe that is what real connections are, not constant, not always intense, but present in their own way, even when they are quiet. As the day slowly turned into evening, you felt a sense of closure, not the kind that ends everything, but the kind that settles something inside you. The kind that allows you to move forward without carrying unnecessary weight. And in that calmness you realized something simple yet important. That message you saw earlier was not telling you what to do, it was just reminding you of something you already knew deep inside. That sometimes the only thing standing between you and clarity is one small action. One moment of courage. One decision to stop overthinking and just do what feels real. And today you did that. Not perfectly, not without doubt, but honestly. And that is more than enough. You took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling lighter with every second. Whatever happens next, whether it leads somewhere or nowhere, you know one thing for sure. You will not be stuck wondering anymore. You will not be held back by the fear of what if. Because now you understand that the real peace does not come from knowing the outcome, it comes from knowing that you tried when it mattered. And that is something no result can take away from you. And as the night settled in and everything around you grew quieter, you found yourself sitting with a kind of calm you had not felt in a long time. Not because everything in life was suddenly perfect, but because something inside you finally made sense. You were no longer chasing answers or replaying old memories, trying to fix them in your head. You were simply letting them exist as they were. A part of your story. Not something that controlled it. You realized that what you felt earlier was never just about that person. It was about you. It was about your ability to feel deeply. To care without conditions. And to still be open even after things did not go the way you expected. And instead of seeing that as a weakness, you finally saw it for what it really was. Something rare. Something real. Something strong. You looked at your phone one last time. Not with hope. Not with fear. But with acceptance. Knowing that whatever comes next will come naturally. And whatever does not, was never meant to stay. There was no rush now. No pressure to force another conversation. Or to turn this into something bigger than it already was. Because what mattered had already happened. You listened to yourself. You took that step. And you faced something you once avoided. And that changed you in a quiet but powerful way. You leaned back, closing your eyes for a moment, letting that feeling settle completely within you. And for the first time in a long while, your mind was not filled with questions. It was filled with stillness. A kind of stillness that does not come from having all the answers, but from being okay without them. You understood now that not every connection is meant to last forever. And not every moment is meant to lead somewhere. But that does not make them meaningless. Some moments are meant to remind you of who you are, of what you feel, and of the parts of you that are still alive beneath everything you have been through. And this was one of those moments. You smiled slightly to yourself. Not because of them. Not because of the past. But because of you. Because you showed up for yourself in a way you had not before. And as you finally put your phone aside, and allowed the night to take over, you carried that quiet realization with you. That sometimes the real soulmate connection is not just about another person. It is about the moment you reconnect with yourself. And stop being afraid of your own feelings. And maybe that is what this was. Never a coincidence. Never just a random line on a screen. But a small push from life. Reminding you that some answers are not found by waiting. They are found by choosing. And tonight, you chose. And that was enough.